Sheriff Malcolm Cotton Gaines was the embodiment of small-town charm and authority in Monroe County, a picturesque town where everyone knew each other and secrets were hard to keep. At 45, he held a position of respect and admiration, known for his firm yet fair approach to law enforcement. To the townsfolk, he was not just the sheriff. He was a pillar of the community, a devoted husband to his wife Cindy, and a loving father to their two children. With his broad shoulders and commanding presence, Malcolm exuded an aura of strength and reliability, traits that endeared him to the citizens he protected. However, beneath this polished exterior lay a man living a double life, marked by deceit and betrayal. For years, Malcolm maintained a secret affair with Mandy Brooks, a vibrant and impressionable 19-year-old waitress from the local diner. Their relationship began innocently enough, with playful banter over coffee and flirtatious smiles. But it quickly escalated into a passionate liaison that would shatter the lives of everyone involved. While Malcolm played the role of a devoted family man in public, he reveled in the excitement and thrill of his illicit romance behind closed doors. He believed he was clever, able to compartmentalize his life without anyone discovering his betrayal. But in a small town where gossip traveled fast, whispers began to circulate. Friends and acquaintances noticed Malcolm's late-night absences and secretive phone calls, but few dared to confront him directly. After all, he was the sheriff, a figure who commanded both respect and fear. Malcolm's world was one of contradictions: the loving husband who took his wife to church every Sunday, and the unfaithful lover who promised Mandy a future that he had no intention of delivering. This duplicity bred a growing sense of tension within him. While he enjoyed the thrill of his double life, the guilt began to gnaw at his conscience. He was caught in a web of lies that became increasingly difficult to maintain, and the stakes were rising. Cindy, his wife, had always trusted Malcolm implicitly. She had supported his career, stood by him through political campaigns, and poured her heart into raising their children. But as Malcolm continued his affair, he grew more distant from Cindy. She began to sense something was amiss. Her husband was often preoccupied, lost in thought, and occasionally his demeanor changed, revealing the weight of the secrets he bore. Though Cindy tried to dismiss her suspicions, the unsettling feeling of betrayal lingered in the back of her mind, a dark cloud hovering over their seemingly perfect life. As the affair intensified, Malcolm found himself drawn deeper into a world of deception. He lavished Mandy with attention, promising her a life of happiness and love, while maintaining the facade of a devoted husband and father. Their secret meetings became more frequent, and the thrill of sneaking around only added to the allure. Malcolm felt alive when he was with Mandy, experiencing a rush that contrasted starkly with the predictability of his life at home. Yet, every moment spent with Mandy felt like a ticking time bomb, and Malcolm knew it was only a matter of time before his two worlds collided. Caught in a precarious balance, Malcolm was about to learn that living a double life comes with dangerous consequences. The growing strain on his marriage, combined with the risks associated with his affair, set the stage for a tragic downfall that would reverberate through the community he had sworn to protect. Little did he know, his carefully constructed facade was crumbling, and the secrets he kept would soon spiral into a chaotic series of events, leading to a confrontation that would change everything. Sheriff Malcolm Cotton Gaines, a man known for his authority and strong presence, had built his reputation as a man of law and order in Monroe County. But beneath this polished exterior, his personal life was spiraling out of control. His affair with 19-year-old Mandy Brooks had become a toxic secret, one that threatened to destroy not only his career, but his marriage to Cindy Gay Gaines. Malcolm met Mandy at a local diner where she worked as a waitress, and what began as harmless flirtation quickly evolved into a full-blown affair. Mandy, young and impressionable, was drawn to Malcolm's confidence and charm. To her, he was more than just the sheriff. He was a powerful man who could offer her an escape from her mundane life. Malcolm, on the other hand, saw Mandy as a thrill, a secret indulgence that kept him feeling youthful and rebellious. But as their relationship deepened, the stakes became much higher. Mandy soon found herself pregnant, a development that neither she nor Malcolm had anticipated. She was desperate for Malcolm to leave his wife, hoping that he would embrace the idea of starting a new life with her and their unborn child. However, Malcolm had no intentions of leaving Cindy, especially with the looming election season. He was a man whose image was everything, and a scandal like this would ruin him. Cindy, meanwhile, had begun to sense that something was wrong. After 20 years of marriage, she could tell when Malcolm was hiding something. He had grown distant, coming home late at night with flimsy excuses, and the warmth in their relationship had turned cold. Cindy's suspicions festered, but she tried to convince herself it was all in her head, until the day she received a phone call from an anonymous source. The caller, later revealed to be Mandy herself, confessed everything. Desperate and afraid, Mandy reached out to Cindy, believing that this would push Malcolm into taking responsibility for their child. She laid it all out: the affair, the pregnancy, the lies. Cindy, reeling from the shock, now had to confront the brutal truth that her husband was not only cheating, but also had fathered a child with a teenager. The love triangle had reached its breaking point, and Cindy found herself spiraling into a world of anger, betrayal, and despair. The morning of June 27, 2009, began like any other in the small, sleepy town of Monroe. But for Cindy, it was a day that would mark the end of her life as she knew it. At around 7 a.m., a frantic 911 call was placed by Cindy herself, her voice eerily calm as she informed the dispatcher that her husband, Malcolm Cotton Gaines, had been shot. When the police arrived at the Gaines residence, what they found shocked even the most seasoned officers. Malcolm lay in the master bedroom, his body slumped in bed. There were 3 gunshot wounds, one to the chest, one to the head, and the final shot aimed in a clear act of malice to his genitals. Blood stained the sheets and splattered across the walls, evidence of a brutal, intimate crime. The gun, Malcolm's own service revolver, lay discarded on the floor beside the bed, the last remnant of a violent confrontation. Cindy was found pacing in the kitchen, her clothes spotless, and her face strangely composed. She made no attempt to run or hide. Instead, she greeted the officers with a sense of cold resignation. "I killed him," she said simply. There was no hysteria, no tears, just an emptiness that chilled everyone in the room. Malcolm's death sent shockwaves through the town. He had been a pillar of the community, a figure who, despite his personal flaws, had commanded respect. Now, he was gone, the victim of a crime that no one could have imagined. The case was immediately categorized as a domestic homicide, but it quickly became clear that this was more than just a typical murder. As investigators examined the scene and began speaking to witnesses, they uncovered a web of deceit, betrayal, and dark secrets that had been festering beneath the surface of the Gaines marriage for years. Detective Ben Tillman, a seasoned investigator with years of experience in homicide, was assigned to the case. From the moment he entered the Gaines home, he knew this would be anything but straightforward. Cindy had confessed, but her calm demeanor and the extreme nature of the crime raised several red flags. There was more to this story than a simple confession. The investigation started with forensic evidence from the crime scene. The positioning of the gun and the angle of the shots suggested that Malcolm had been asleep when the first bullet hit him in the chest. The second shot, which struck his head, was likely fired moments after, while the third and final shot, the one aimed at his genitals, was fired in a fit of rage. The deliberate mutilation suggested deep-seated anger and personal vendetta, not just self-defense or a crime of passion. As they combed through the Gaines' home, detectives found signs of a tumultuous marriage. There were holes in the walls, broken furniture, and documents that pointed to financial troubles. It became apparent that this had not been a happy household for quite some time. Detective Tillman also turned his attention to Cindy's relationships. Friends and neighbors described her as a quiet, reserved woman who had largely kept to herself in recent years. They all spoke of Malcolm's dominant personality, hinting at potential abuse behind closed doors. But no one had ever seen or heard anything that suggested violence between the two. As for Malcolm, his colleagues at the sheriff's department were devastated by his death, but rumors about his personal life soon began to surface. It didn't take long for investigators to uncover Malcolm's affair with Mandy Brooks, which shifted the focus of the investigation entirely. Mandy, when brought in for questioning, was visibly shaken but cooperative. She admitted to the affair and revealed that she had recently told Cindy about the pregnancy. This revelation sent the investigation spiraling into the world of a love triangle that had gone horribly wrong. Cindy's arrest marked the beginning of a deeper dive into her psyche, her marriage, and the events that led to the murder. Once known as a loving, devoted wife, Cindy had become a shadow of herself after years of emotional neglect, verbal abuse, and betrayal. The woman sitting in the interrogation room was not the same Cindy people had known. She was composed, almost too calm, for a woman who had just confessed to killing her husband. When detectives asked her why she did it, Cindy's response was chillingly simple. "He ruined my life." In her confession, Cindy painted a bleak picture of her marriage. Malcolm, once a loving husband, had become increasingly controlling and abusive over the years. He belittled her, manipulated her, and often treated her as more of a servant than a partner. When she confronted him about the affair, he dismissed her concerns, even mocking her for being too old to keep his interest. Cindy explained that she had discovered the affair through Mandy's phone call. Mandy had confessed to the pregnancy, and Cindy's world crumbled. For her, the revelation of the affair was humiliating, but the pregnancy was something she could not tolerate. She saw it as the ultimate betrayal, not just of their marriage, but of the life she had sacrificed so much for. For years, Cindy had lived in Malcolm's shadow. She had stood by him through his political career, helped raise their children, and maintain the household while held his reputation as a powerful figure in Monroe. And now, after all her sacrifices, Malcolm had discarded her for a younger woman, leaving her feeling used, discarded, and broken. Cindy described how the night of the murder unfolded. She had been lying in bed next to Malcolm, her mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and revenge. She couldn't sleep. The anger festered until it consumed her, and in a moment of cold calculation, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She retrieved Malcolm's service revolver from the garage and returned to the bedroom. As he slept, she stood over him for what felt like hours, battling with herself about what to do. And then, with the gun in her hand, she fired. Her confession was detailed, emotionless, as if she had long since made peace with her decision. Cindy didn't deny the murder, nor did she try to shift blame. In her mind, Malcolm had brought this upon himself. For Cindy, it wasn't just about the affair. It was about years of pain and humiliation that had finally reached a boiling point. Killing Malcolm, in her eyes, was the only way to reclaim the life he had stolen from her. The tragic tale of Cindy Gay Gaines was not just about murder. It was a story of a woman pushed to the edge by years of emotional torment and betrayal. Whether she was a cold-blooded killer or a victim of circumstance, one thing was clear. Cindy's life, much like Malcolm's, had been destroyed long before that fatal night in June. Mandy Brooks was the catalyst that set off the chain of events leading to Malcolm Gaines' brutal murder. At just 19 years old, she was young, naive, and drawn into an affair with a man twice her age, unaware of the emotional and physical destruction it would cause. In the quiet town of Monroe, Mandy was a local girl, raised in a modest household with dreams of leaving her small-town life behind. She worked as a waitress at the local diner where she first met Malcolm, a regular customer. To Mandy, Malcolm wasn't just another man. He was someone important, a figure of authority who represented power and influence in a way she had never experienced before. At first, their relationship seemed innocent. Malcolm would stop by for coffee, flirt casually, and occasionally leave large tips. But soon, what started as playful banter turned into late-night conversations, secretive rendezvous, and eventually, a full-blown affair. Malcolm was attentive and affectionate at first, showering her with gifts and promises. To Mandy, he was an escape from the monotony of her life, and she believed Malcolm when he told her that his marriage to Cindy was over in everything but name. However, as months passed, Mandy's initial excitement turned into confusion and frustration. She wanted more, a future with Malcolm, a life beyond sneaking around in the shadows. When she found out she was pregnant, she saw it as the moment that would finally bring Malcolm into her life for good. But Malcolm's reaction was far from what she had hoped. He was furious. making it clear that this wasn't part of his plan. He wanted to keep the affair secret and had no intention of leaving his wife or publicly acknowledging the child. Desperate, Mandy tried to force his hand by telling Cindy about the pregnancy, believing this would push Malcolm into making a decision. But instead, it only fueled the dangerous fire that was already burning inside Cindy. Mandy's youth and naivety became her downfall. She had entered into an affair thinking she could have Malcolm, but now she found herself trapped, used, and discarded by a man who had promised her the world. In the days leading up to Malcolm's murder, Mandy was caught in a whirlwind of emotions: fear, desperation, and the growing realization that she had been nothing more than a pawn in Malcolm's games. Her involvement in the affair made her a key figure in the investigation. The police saw her not just as a mistress, but as a potential motive for Cindy's actions. Mandy, however, was more a victim than a villain. She had been manipulated by Malcolm, drawn into a situation far beyond her control, and now she had to face the devastating consequences. The murder of Malcolm Gaines was not a crime of impulse. It was the culmination of years of tension, resentment, and betrayal. Cindy Gay Gaines had endured her husband's infidelities for years, but when Mandy's pregnancy was revealed, it became the breaking point. Cindy had spent 2 decades standing by Malcolm's side, supporting his career, raising their children, and maintaining their home. But despite her loyalty, she had always felt overshadowed by Malcolm's ego and ambition. The affair with Mandy was not the first time Malcolm had strayed, but this time was different. The pregnancy was a cruel reminder that Malcolm had not only betrayed her, but he was building a life with another woman, the younger woman at that. In the days following Mandy's confession, Cindy's mental state deteriorated rapidly. The humiliation, the anger, and the overwhelming sense of betrayal consumed her. She became obsessed with the idea that Malcolm had taken everything from her: her youth, her dignity, her future. Friends and neighbors who interacted with Cindy during this time described her as a woman unraveling. She withdrew from her social circles, stopped caring about her appearance, and spent hours alone in her home, contemplating what her life had become. On the night of the murder, Cindy's thoughts turned darker. She couldn't bear the idea of Malcolm leaving her for Mandy and starting a new family, not after everything she had sacrificed for him. The weight of the betrayal crushed her, and the once quiet, submissive wife had reached her breaking point. She felt trapped, powerless, and desperate. And in her mind, there was only one way to end the suffering. With the gun in hand, Cindy made the decision to take back the power Malcolm had stripped from her. This was not just an act of revenge. It was, for Cindy, a twisted form of justice. In her mind, she wasn't just killing Malcolm, she was killing the version of herself that had been subjugated for years. The act was deliberate, cold, and calculated. Each bullet was a manifestation of the rage and pain she had kept bottled up for decades. The murder itself was as violent as it was personal. Cindy's methodical approach to Malcolm's execution left no doubt that this was more than just a moment of blind fury. The final shot, the one aimed at Malcolm's genitals, was not only a symbol of emasculation, but also a deep expression of the betrayal Cindy felt. She wanted Malcolm to suffer, even in death, for what he had done to her. After pulling the trigger, Cindy stood over Malcolm's body, the weight of her actions beginning to sink in. She didn't panic, nor did she attempt to flee. Instead, she sat quietly for hours, waiting for morning to come. It was as if she had prepared herself for this moment for weeks, rehearsing in her mind what she would do and say once it was over. When the police arrived and Cindy calmly confessed to the murder, they were taken aback by her composure. She made no excuses, offered no emotional outburst, just a simple statement: "I killed him." The coldness in her voice sent chills through the officers, and many wondered if Cindy had always been capable of such violence, or if this was truly the result of years of emotional abuse that had pushed her to the edge. Forensic evidence confirmed that the murder was premeditated. The position of the gun, the angle of the shots, and the deliberate placement of the final blow all pointed to a calculated act of revenge. Cindy's lack of remorse further fueled speculation that this had been building for years, a slow burn of anger that had finally exploded in the most violent way possible. Cindy's trial was a spectacle in Monroe County. drawing media attention from across the state. The courtroom was packed with journalists, curious locals, and supporters from both sides of the case. Cindy's defense team portrayed her as a victim of years of emotional abuse, a woman pushed to her limits by a controlling and manipulative husband. They painted Malcolm as a tyrant, a man who had used his power to oppress his wife and treat her as little more than an accessory to his public life. The prosecution, however, saw things differently. They argued that Cindy had acted out of cold-blooded revenge, not self-defense. The affair with Mandy and the pregnancy had undoubtedly been devastating, but they didn't justify murder. Cindy's calm demeanor after the crime and her precise execution of Malcolm suggested that this was not a momentary lapse of control, but a premeditated act. The trial lasted for weeks, with testimony from friends, family members, and even Mandy herself. Mandy's tearful account of her relationship with Malcolm and her fear of Cindy only added to the drama. She described how she had tried to warn Malcolm about Cindy's growing instability, but he had ignored her concerns. Mandy, still pregnant at the time, became a symbol of both innocence and naivety, another victim of Malcolm's selfish desires. The jury deliberated for several days before delivering their verdict. Cindy was found guilty of second-degree murder. The sentence was heavy, 25 years to life in prison, but many in the community felt conflicted. Some saw Cindy as a broken woman who had finally taken back control after years of suffering. Others believed she had gone too far and should have been sentenced to a harsher punishment for the brutality of her crime. The aftermath of Malcolm Gaines's murder left deep scars on everyone involved. Monroe County, once a quiet, unassuming town, was now infamous for the scandal that had rocked its community. Cindy's conviction brought some closure to the case, but the questions surrounding Malcolm's legacy and the true nature of his marriage remained. For Mandy Brooks, the fallout was devastating. She gave birth to her child, a baby boy, just months after the trial concluded. However, she was left to raise him alone, the shadow of Malcolm's death hanging over her. The media attention made it impossible for Mandy to live a normal life in Monroe, and eventually, she moved away to escape the constant scrutiny. The affair, the pregnancy, and Malcolm's death had forever altered the course of her life, leaving her to pick up the pieces of a future that had been ripped apart. As for Cindy, prison became a place of both punishment and reflection. She had been sentenced for her crime, but in her own mind, she had already served a life sentence. Years of emotional abuse that had worn her down to the point of breaking. Behind bars, Cindy maintained a stoic demeanor, rarely speaking of Malcolm or the events that led to his death. She remained a polarizing figure, with some viewing her as a victim and others as a cold-blooded killer. The Gaines children, now adults, were left to reconcile the public image of their father with the private man who had caused so much pain. The trial had revealed ugly truths about Malcolm's character, forcing them to come to terms with